and bring up the real intro from the track. And I just want to go ahead and let it play, and even where the organ triplets come in over the top.
Okay.
Where he got that second chord, I don't know. That's it.
All right, welcome back to the In My Beach Boys Room podcast. Adam Schreiner here, sitting with Matthew Hartz, and we know it's been a little while. Matthew and I have both been busy as usual. Thank you for your patience. We do have a great episode here for you. Matthew has been just gigging around, doing his
spent a little bit of time in Beach Boy land last weekend down in L.A., Huntington Beach, and San Juan Capistrano.
So, as you can see from the title, we were honored to have David Beard. We had a nice conversation with David Beard that we're going to get into about Little Girl I Once Knew, the new Beach Boys book that came out, and the documentary that's coming up. David had a ton of info on an insight into the book and the documentary, and then Matthew breaks down Little Girl I Once Knew, and so we do our typical thing there. As always, please like, subscribe. You can find Matthew on Facebook, just Matthew Hartz. Instagram is Matthew Hartz Music. Always appreciate the support. And speaking of support, we had a lot of sponsorships come in over the last month and a half or whatever it's been since we've been able to get an episode out. So we want to take the time to acknowledge them here. And so this name is the one I was struggling with.
It's fine. Olaf Kursbergen.
Nice.
Maybe.
Thank you, Matthew, for saving me. So that was one of our sponsors, as well as Quentin Love and Shelly Graham. Thank you so much. We also did have several sponsors that did not want to be acknowledged, and we're not going to say you by name, but we do acknowledge you and thank you very much for your sponsorship.
And I wanted to say something real. Yes, thank you to everybody, but Quentin Love. I have to ask you about your last name, buddy. But thank you. He sent us a nice note. This young man is, I think, 15, 16 years old. He's a musician. He's really getting into the music. And like I say, he sent us a nice note and some money. And I just wanted to thank him. And I want to encourage other young people to get into the music like Quentin is.
Yeah,
it's pretty inspiring.
Yeah, and Quentin, that message to be, I don't think at 15 or 16, I would have done that same thing. And the maturity and the perspective to go out of your way to support us, man, that's something else. So yeah. And at someone your age, we always want to acknowledge the youth for doing cool stuff. So nice job.
Yes.
He did a very, very cool. So thank you very much. I do want to make a quick note. How our sponsorship works is you go to Matthew Hartz Music. You can find the link in the description below. I'll throw up a QR code for you. If you're watching on your, on a TV or something, you can just scan it with your phone. But what that's going to do is it's going to take you to the web page. You're going to fill out a form. So after you fill out the form, you're going to be able to either pay via PayPal or Venmo. Some people, they decide not to pay or get lost. We've seen a couple of people. So I just want to explain kind of that process here, just because we have ran into that issue. You fill out the form, then you click on the PayPal or Venmo, whichever you prefer. You can also write us a check. Just shoot us an email at info@matthewhartsmusic.com, and we can get you an address to send a check to. We have had people do that in the past. So with that being said, I think we'll just go ahead and show you the conversation that we had with David. It was it's dense. It's a dense one. A lot of information coming from David, and it's cool to get his perspective with the knowledge that he has and the experience he has being so close to the Beach Boys world. So,
yeah, it was a definite honor to have him on the podcast.
So hope you enjoy.
Well, today we are very honored on the In My Beach Boys Room podcast to have as a guest a man who I have admired his writing for over 30 years now, we figured out when we talked. When I first subscribed to ESQ when I was in college in the 90s sometime, is when it would have been. And anyway, I just feel like, and I know that the Beach Boys feel like that his publication is the law. It's the word on things going on with the Beach Boys. He's got his finger on the pulse of what's going on, and I just love your writing style too, David. It's amazing. So I better go ahead and introduce him. This is David Beard, and we're so glad to have you, David.
Yeah, thank you.
David. Thank you both.
Awesome. That's very great. Matthew had told me, about you, and so. Before we, start getting into some of the details of, we're going to talk Little Girl I Once Knew, but there's some Beach Boys current news going on that we definitely want to ask you about. But one thing that, this podcast, we have two audiences that we serve, and the majority of the audience is going to be the diehard Beach Boy fans who dig into all the details and love all that stuff. But we do have a small portion that is more kind of where I fall, and that we are, Beach Boys fans, but we might not know all the little details, or, really, we might not, David, really know who you are. So can you just tell me, and the people that kind of align with me, kind of your Beach Boys story? One thing that I love is I love hearing what hooked people into Beach Boys. We get comments all over our videos of when we talk about a certain song or a certain album of like, that was what hooked them into the Beach Boys. And I'm just curious, as someone who's been so involved with them, what was your, what was your Beach Boys moment that, that resonated with you and got you into the band?
Well, my path to the Beach Boys was through Jan and Dean. Because I saw it at some point, I want to say 79 or 80, I had moved from New York to Charlotte, North Carolina, from my dad worked for IBM. And within a short period of time, I was just in charge of babysitting my younger brother. I wasn't doing a very good job because I was in front of the TV, and the Jan and Dean TV movie, Dead Man's Curve, came on. And I watched that, and if anyone has seen it, I think it's probably on YouTube if you wanted to watch it. But towards the end, Mike Love and Bruce Johnston make cameos along with Dick Clark. And Dennis Wilson had been asked, but he declined. He told Dean he would be too expensive.
That's awesome.
Well, and at the spot where they make their cameos, that's where Jan gets out of sync with the... Is that the spot? Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, at the very end there, when it's coming to their kind of comeback moment, when after the accident. And so that's where I became visually aware that there was a Beach Boys Jan and Dean connection. And really only up until that point, I think maybe, and I'm not sure, I hope I'm remembering this correctly, I think maybe I may have had Best of the Beach Boys, maybe. They had the Columbia or RCA record club thing. Mm-hmm. And so I may have had Best of the Beach Boys, but I really didn't. I may have listened to it once or twice. I think I knew Beach Boy songs. I would hear Beach Boy songs on the radio, but nothing really stood out to me. And what galvanized my love of early Beach Boys and Jan and Dean music was a scene in the Dead Man's Curve TV movie where Richard Hatch as Jan and Bruce Davidson as Dean had surfboards, and they were standing at the foot of the ocean as they were getting ready to go out on their boards. And Jan says to Dean, "This would sound so great on tape." And he says, "What?" "This. It would sound so great on tape." And then it cuts to them in the studio doing surfing. And it was just that moment of they're standing at the shore, and all of a sudden they're in the studio going, "Surfing is the only life, the only way for me now, surf." Now, years later, I would discover the Beach Boys sang background on that track with them. So there's all these things, but that's what led me to go shopping. And you guys would, depending on your age, Matt, you would know that you could go in the late 70s, early 80s, you could go out anywhere and go to a record store and used record store, anywhere you really wanted to go. They were everywhere back then. And I went and found the Jan and Dean Anthology album, a 2-record set that had a beautiful gatefold with a booklet inside.
I just picked that up about a couple of months ago. At my
yeah. Dave Marsh of Cream magazine wrote the liner notes, and he talks about Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys. And then, of course, I'm reading the co-writer credits to some of Jan and Dean's bigger hits, and lo and behold, it's Brian Wilson. So that is kind of what started me going down the rabbit hole of wanting to know more. And then, of course, when you get into Jan and Dean, you hear Surf City, and Surf City came from Brian, and I didn't know the origins of that song too much, but I loved Surf City. 2 girls for every boy. What red-blooded guy doesn't like the idea of that? So I was like, yeah, okay. I don't know if I can surf, but certainly the idea of having a chick on either arm sounds like a cool thing. I never made it to that level, but the Beach Boys and Jan and Dean did, and I was just like in awe of the idea and the concept. So that's kind of what sucked me in. And then what I really liked early on is also the theatrical nature of the Jan and Dean music, the sidewalk surfing with the skateboard sound effect, and Dead Man's Curve with the car wreck and the talking at the bridge of the song about the accident. And I thought, this is so theatrical. So I at a very early age was very intrigued by the theatrical and conceptual nature of the music. By the time I got to the Beach Boys, would have been two or so years later. My youth minister in my church, he was a Beach Boy fan. He loved the late 70s stuff like the LA Light album, and he was trying to turn me on to that. And I wasn't so much into it because I was too young to appreciate the nuances and the Dennis's incredible songwriting. But I did like, as I by that time had Endless Summer, the 2-record set Endless Summer. And we would take that on wherever we went as a youth group, we would take it. And in no time, guys, I had the youth group. We went on a ski trip. I rewrote the lyrics of Surfin' to Skiing, and I had the entire youth group singing Skiing.
Nice.
I did the
nice.
I drove everybody crazy with my love of Jan and Dean and the Beach Boys the second I got into it. And then I think that probably late 80s, it was late 80s where I fell in love with the Beach Boys music, but the song that really changed me, that I am still as my favorite Beach Boys song, is Cabanescence. That was the one that when I heard it and understood all that was taking place underneath it, because I also, around the same time I heard it on 2020, but I within a couple of years of hearing it on 2020, and I heard it, this is so weird, I heard it on 2020 in the Warner Brothers reprise packaging, the beige.
Yes, with the girls and the bikinis.
Yes. I didn't even have.
That's how I first heard it too. Cabanescence.
I didn't have the original Wild Honey, Smiley Smile, Friends or 2020 album. They were in those beige packaging, and I thought, what is this? But it did enough that it got me further into the catalog. So it wasn't until the late 80s I went to a record convention, discovered Smile bootlegs, and really good Smile vinyl bootlegs back in those days. Mm-hmm. And I was listening to like the Truck Driving Man part of Cabanescence and hearing all these things and going, oh my Lord, there's so much there. So to this day, when I listen to Cabanescence, I feel like I'm listening to a painting.
That's so cool. Yeah.
And that's true for me with a lot of Brian's compositions.
Yeah, me too. Very visual.
Very visual. And this goes back to that immediacy of love I had for the Jan and Dean music because of the theatrical nature of what they put together with like Sidewalk Surfing and Dead Man's Curve. And side 4 of the Anthology album, which is the cacophony of madness that they put together. But Cabanescence, all-time Beach Boy favorite.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because that was actually going to be a follow-up question, was if there was like a song or an album or whatever that kind of hit you in the way that you described. So yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. That's awesome. So
do we want to talk a little bit? David, all I've seen of the new documentary, which I think is it May 24th is our release date on Disney Plus, is where it's going to be streaming. And so I've just had a chance, David, to see the trailer, and that's enticing. And I was just wondering, I figured if anybody might have a little bit of inside knowledge, it might be you that can tell us a little bit about what we might be expecting with that.
Well, the company that did this also did one on Lucille Ball. And what was the other one? And oh gosh, now this goes. When I initially started working with them, it was well over a year ago, and I'm trying to remember. They pointed me in the direction of several of the documentaries that I watched, and all the ones. There was two that I watched. I want to say they also did the 8 Days a Week Ron Howard Beatles thing, and the thing. My feelings towards the Ron Howard thing is I love Ron Howard's work because I think Arrested Development is one of the best television shows I've ever seen. But the thing that I remember thinking when I watched 8 Days a Week was, why is Whoopi Goldberg in there? It just didn't seem to fit with, I mean, culturally, I understood when I listened to what she said, but just, I would never have envisioned her being in it. It just seemed like an out of place person to include.
That reminds me of like Long Promised Road. There were a few people that, when that came out, they're like going, I'm having trouble with context and how, but I have to remember that culturally I'm not very hip. And I don't know what some of these people's, but it seems like a lot of things, this particular situation happens where we're trying to figure out what's their connection to this. I understand.
Well, and I think that's what you and I both experienced. We're older. We've been, we're a certain point in an age. We've been through enough of life, and we've seen enough, we experienced things enough ourselves that we're trying to think, okay, what's the connection between this and this? And I think it speaks using the word culturally. I think it speaks to the reach of these iconic artists, right? I mean, I think the Beach Boys have such a broad reach. It's like in the was it Linda Perry who was in One Person? Yes. So I was like, how did she get? But again, it speaks to, oh wow, so even she
was affected,
Yeah, exactly. So then it's like, okay, and you did Jim James. Oh wow, I would have never put that yet. But again, then
and through them, we're hitting new Beach Boy audiences, hopefully.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, 100%. So what I liked early on when I was contacted to do, to help out, and that was with images if they needed something, or kind of putting them in touch with maybe people that never have been spoken to before, that would be that are a part of the Beach Boy world. Like I was able to assist with bringing John Parks in.
Oh wow! And if
anybody who's a reader of ESQ knows, John was a very dear friend of Dennis Wilson.
Well, he's actually the Parks of No Calls from Korthoff, Parks or Grillo.
Parks and Grillo.
Yeah,
that's exactly.
It's not Van Dyke. Some people always thought it was Van Dyke. I said, no, that's John with no H in the name. I think it's just Jon, right?
Jon. That's right. So I was able to connect him with them, among others, and so what I liked early on that immediately made me feel comfortable working with them. And again, keep this in mind. This is Whitefish Productions. This is not Disney Plus. Okay. They do their documentary. They put it together, and then it gets felt out. Who wants to buy this? Who wants this? And Disney Plus ended up with it. So Disney Plus did not produce it.
Interesting. Okay.
They're the streaming service that has it. And heck, they did the Beatles' "Let It Be," right? So I mean, it's not bad. It's not bad company as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, the trailer looks great. I thought it looks great.
The thing that immediately made me feel comfortable and really good about working with Whitefish was the woman that I initially spoke to gave me these other documentaries as examples, and I spoke to her immediately about. I said, my concern with doing anything with anyone is that how the family is represented and handled, and how that history is handled. Because, Murray is depending on your point of view or how well you knew the guy, and I didn't know him at all, you could be galvanized, it could be, but what I heard immediately was we approach things from a very loving perspective. We want to tell the family story. And I was like, okay, I'm in.
That's fantastic, David. And I just want, that's one of the things that, there's a lot of villains that people have created, and for obvious reasons, but the whole Murray thing is so complicated, and with everything that went down, I feel like all three boys still loved him till the end in ways, and it's just a complicated situation. I'm really glad to hear, though, that everything was treated lovingly. I like that. That's where I kind of like to come from on all of it, So
well, yeah, I read a lot of stuff. Well, I don't a lot, but when I go to a message board or see comments even about the new book, people are saying they're always finding what's wrong with something.
Totally,
and as opposed to absorbing what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Just say, okay, what is this before I start going off on a specific, before I lock my heels in and go in this direction and say this about something. What is it that I can find that I like about something as opposed to finding what I dislike about something, even before I have the opportunity to look at it and view it and process it. So that I think a lot of people are in their own way.
Yeah.
In that regard.
David, I want to move on to talking about the book a little bit, but before we move on from the documentary, I felt like I might have derailed you a little bit. Do you have any other, what can we expect? Do you know if it's basically a storyline type documentary or?
I really don't have any other insight.
Okay.
That I can share.
All right. Yeah. Well, I know we're all looking forward to it.
Yeah. David, let's move on. Let's move to the book.
Can we talk about this thing a little bit? I have to say that it got delivered on the 2nd, but it was delivered a moment before I had to take off for San Juan Capistrano, where I had to play a bunch of gigs last weekend down in the LA area. But when I got to Cedar City, Utah, because I had a bunch of equipment we had to drive down, I finally got in the hotel room. And I on purposely didn't, I looked at, I think it was 10 to 11 or maybe 10 to 10 or something like that. And I thought, okay, you can't read through this, baby. You got to just kind of leaf through it, digest a little bit of it. And I kid you not, I looked up what seemed like was 5 minutes. It was already like 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. And I thought, I got to get this. I can't look at it anymore. So I was locked. There are a lot of images and there are a lot of quotes that I'm unfamiliar with. And I was glad to see that. I was very surprised to see the book essentially end at 1980, but I smile because that's where my timeline in the studio ends. Not really. I mean, I have stuff from after that, but it's funny, Adam, how many times have I had people down here and I tell them that. I said, kind of, the story,
I remember when you said that to me.
So it surprises me, though, David, just from the fact of, there's barely any mention of Kokomo and stuff like that, and how many fans came in via that stuff after, especially around 88 when Kokomo hit so large and everything. But I agree with them telling the story like that. It just seems strange that they made that choice.
Well,
do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. So when the book ended the way it did, which is Nebworth, and then how Nebworth gave Mike the idea to do the July 4th concert. In the U.S. because the U.K. is Nebworth.
Well, the first July 4th was just that same, like 2-3 weeks later, right?
And that's where the book ends.
Okay.
So high note. We're not talking about Dennis drowning. We're not talking. So this book encapsulates the Beach Boys with Dennis Wilson as a functioning member of the group, and I like that it stops with that. So because it starts with all of them talking, and that's the other thing I thought was so beautifully done and executed, was that the book begins with everybody, all the guys you see on the cover, having something to say, and then at the very end we have Carl and Dennis with something to say. Right? They have a page at the very end as well. So I felt the book does a great job of bringing Dennis and Carl, giving them kind of a living voice in the book. And that was a big deal to me.
Mm-hmm.
To have them gathered this way. There's a quote early on in the book where Carl refers to their early music as hippie music.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, I never in a million years, garage band, yeah. Hippie music? Carl is calling their early surf stuff hippie music. And I just would have never, and so all of a sudden, I'm thinking differently about the Beach Boys
mm-hmm.
that I've never thought of that way before. And it's thanks to Carl Wilson. So that even that little tiny quote, I was just suddenly kind of like interested. You know, so all of a sudden my mind, the way that I'm thinking about this early music, that I have a fresh perspective from a member who's no longer here,
mm-hmm.
was really fascinating to me.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things that struck me about the book that I really liked. The other thing that I really liked was the handwritten lyrics, especially in the mid-'70s. All of a sudden, we have handwritten lyrics by Brian for "Life is for the Living."
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, whoa, this is cool. So, and I didn't expect any of the Adult Child album to even be discussed, and I was really happily surprised. So the book also focuses more on their albums and their recordings than it does anything else. So not so much like missed opportunities. It doesn't really talk about how they pulled out of Monterey, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't it's not, the book isn't really about those things. It's more about the family, the influences of music, how they use the influences of music, and how each one of them contributed. So I think it's important, and I wrote this in my review that's on the ESQ website. David Marks is not on the cover, and I really hope people aren't going to die on their sword and not get the book because he's not. He doesn't contribute as much as I would like to, but he does contribute in the book. He also contributes. He's also in the new documentary. Mm-hmm. So it's not like he's not thought of or anything like that.
I thought that was curious too, but I've always told people in the podcast is that some of my favorite interviews are those BBC interviews that David did for the Dennis Wilson documentary that they did, mm-hmm. and you know, it's just, you know, we still got this guy that was really there. You know, you know, learning to play guitar with Carl and all. And I got to admit that would have been a want of mine. You know, the guy that's on the monument in Hawthorne is not on the front of the book, you know, kind of a thing. But I also understand the one thing you got back to the quotes. One of the things in the podcast that I'm always having to kind of get around after I think it was the Long Promised Road documentary come out, and we talked about it a little bit. And Adam had said, is there anything that bugged you? And I go, well, like when he's talking about never hearing Pacific Ocean Blue. That's not true. I've seen interviews from Dennis from that period where he talks about playing it for him. I'd seen Brian talk about the album at that time. And then I'm reading through the book, and it like magic. You know, a lot of times I say I haven't listened to Pacific Ocean Blue, and that's not true. I did hear, you know, and I thought, yeah, I knew. And I love those clarifying. There's a lot of those clarifying moments, especially Bruce has a lot to say musically that I've never heard before. Mm-hmm. Carl analyzes the music, like you say, in new ways, new and fresh ways. And I just love it. The one thing that I think probably gets me more than anything, and I think it hit me in this book, I saw what looked like to be party session photographs before they should have been in there. Sometime they were lining up with 1964, and I said, wait a second, Bruce is sitting there with that P bass, and he's got his tennis shoes on and sitting at and those are kind of some of my things that when I find little things like that. But that being said, I don't know how many of them in here. I just saw a couple.
Well, there's quite a few, and in fact, there's where it really jumped out. I like you. I was going through the book, not really reading the quotes so much as I was just kind of going through the pages when I first got it, just to kind of get a feel for the overall content. And I think it's chapters 9 and 10. The images are reversed. I don't know if I don't know if Genesis realizes that or not. But if you look at I think it's 9. It's 66, 67, and it's a photo of the guys in 67. But then when you go to the next chapter, it says 68, 69, and it's them in the tent with the beagle on top.
Okay.
And that's a 66 image, and it's like, oh, and you just had the Wild Honey page. There's a song title, Missing. Here Comes the Night is missing from the Wild Honey song album lineup. And I'm like,
you're breaking my heart, David.
But again, it's like, okay, we're never going to get a book like this again. Mm-mm. So we're going to have to accept what we have. We can be upset, or we can just love what we have. What's the point of being upset? It's an expensive book. True. But it a lot of energy and time went into it, and I think why, if I'm going to use the word bothers me, that these things aren't, like, the images aren't used correctly. It bothers me on the level that it would never happen with the Beatles, and that's why it bothers me a little bit, because if the Beatles can put out a book, an anthology book, which I have, and I have the great Beatles, an illustrated record, which is a kind of a scrapbook, is like one of the first books I ever bought. So I've had that a long time. That was just a scrapbook, and the images are in the correct chronological order. So I don't know why these things happen. And it's as a fan, as somebody who really, all right, this book is coming, this great book, this one of a kind book. You want things to be right. You want because we know, and we're like, okay, these are out of sequence, but not the end of the world. But then a fan, somebody who might be now just discovering the group, does it matter in the big picture? Not at all. Not at all. But we want them to experience the group correctly, because we want them to understand, and as they're turning the page, oh, this is interesting. But here in this book, there's going to be a certain point where they're going to turn the page and go, they kind of look younger than they did over here, than a few pages back. What? Oh, whatever they were eating at the time must have really been working for them. I mean, I don't know, but it's just, it never happens in a Beatles project. These things don't happen. So that's the one thing that I would say, bother me is even too strong of a word. It's just, it's confounding to me that it happens at all.
Yeah, it is. Kind of in the editing stage, how does that not get caught?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think from my perspective, David, I mean, and I think you touched on everything that basically is the same thing that I still think it's an excellent, I think it's a great product, and I'm pleased with it. I look at it, I've been trying to teach Adam, bring him into a better understanding of the Beach Boys for the last couple of years through this podcast. That's the premise of it. I'm teaching him about the Beach Boys. And I really, when I got it, I was so impressed that night in the hotel, and I really thought, you know what? This is something that I would like to get for Adam, who's been learning about it's really something that more than any other book, I love so many of the books that I have. I love David Leaf's, of course. I love those, and then Philip Lambert's books for the music analysis, and Timothy's book is fantastic, and I love Peter Carlin's book too. And a ton of them, But this would be the one that I would say if a fan really wanted a memento of the Beach Boys' career, and if I could give him I'd give him this book.
Absolutely, especially to the earlier point that if they wanted to truly understand the original Beach Boys story, again, it stops at 1980, and it's hardly their whole story, but again, it tells them the story with Dennis Wilson,
yes,
who was a significant force in the group. And so, I mean, and the fact that he gets, there's two things that I think were wonderful that I really, really liked. And one was how much love the Pacific Ocean Blue album gets in the book.
Yep.
And by love, I mean critical appreciation. Critical appreciation from all the other members.
I think it's, and Rufus Wainwright has a really great quote about Dennis in there, right about that.
And the other thing, going back to David Marks, is early on, David doesn't have much in terms of his quotes, but I really enjoyed reading Bruce Johnston's thoughts on David and his contribution to the group, because Bruce was not in the group at that time. And so him talking about this Beach Boys sound and how important David's contribution was to that sound, to me was a significant thing. But to anyone who's, like I said before, David was on the first 4 albums. Mm-hmm. And was very important because he and Carl, as you pointed out, took guitar lessons from John Moss. And for those who don't know who John Moss was, Walker Brothers. Yes. Look up the Walker Brothers.
And they were in out of England.
Yeah,
correct. Right.
Look up "The Sun Ain't Gonna Shine" anymore. It's a great song.
Well,
so that's what I would say. David is they as a group heap much love and critical appreciation of his contribution inside the pages of this book. Mm-hmm. All of them do.
Yeah.
Including Carl, which is, again, important because Carl's not here anymore. So this is very important to have his voice in that discussion. So just one last note about the book. The cover images are, and this is what I wrote in my review, are from the Good Vibrations sessions.
Right.
Because the book goes from their early beginnings to 1980, the biggest song of their career in that time frame was Good Vibrations. Mm-hmm. That's why, in my opinion, that's the cover.
Yeah.
And
I think it's a good cover.
It is. Yeah. It's Good Vibrations changed music history forever.
Yep.
So, good choice.
That is for sure. Well, love the book. How about, David, we're going to get into The Little Girl I Once Knew. Now, when I talked to you on the phone a few weeks ago, you told me you loved Cabinescence, but I think the thing that spurred this getting you involved so quickly is we were going to do this standalone episode on The Little Girl I Once Knew, and you said that's actually, tell me if I'm wrong, your favorite Beach Boys single?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wondered, I've got plenty to say about the music. I was wondering if you could just give us real quickly a little bit of general and historical context on The Little Girl I Once Knew.
Sure. So, it's a song where you can definitely hear Brian Wilson exploring, kind of in the middle of his Christopher Columbus musical world, where he's trying everything and anything that just happens to come to mind, and trying to kind of see, how can I execute the idea? How can I take what I'm hearing in the song, feeling based on my thoughts of what I'm hearing, and wanting these musicians who works with the Wrecking Crew primarily on the recording,
right?
How can I get them to execute this? And then the fact that he twice in the song wants to suspend, he wants the listener, because he obviously felt the need while he was making the song, because this is what you had from Brian Wilson at this period in his career. He was all about executing what he heard and felt within himself on how to create. I don't think I would be shocked at the same, I don't say this, I can't speak for Brian, but when I hear the song, I hear a dramatic stop. I don't know that he was thinking dramatic stop. All I think, really, I don't want to place, Brian absolutely had to be thinking this. I don't know if that's necessarily true, because when you listen to Pet Sounds, right, you definitely hear intention. Right? He intentionally was trying to share who he was with the listener. Thanks to Tony Asher, they were able to go about doing that. And the thing I want to say real quickly, I interviewed Tony Asher in 2005, and I said, Tony, Brian wrote most of the music, you wrote most of the words. Is it fair to say that because people have always felt when they listen to Pet Sounds, they know who Brian Wilson is and what he's about. Is it fair to say because you wrote the lyrics that we would also know who Tony Asher is? And he said, no one's ever asked me that question before. And he paused for about 30 seconds, and he said, yes. And so Pet Sounds is truly a reflection of two young men, right, in their early 20s, and how they looked at life. And the Beach Boys are their vocal carriage. Okay. And the same is true with The Little Girl I Once Knew. It's written by Brian and Mike.
Mm-hmm. Now, Mike doesn't get, this is curiously enough, this is one that Mike didn't get credit on after in 95, when all went down. But I know I've seen where Brian acknowledges that Mike definitely wrote the lyrics to it or had a hand.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Split Man?
Yeah. I got you.
That's absolutely Mike Love. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
That's absolutely Mike Love.
I wonder why he didn't get the credit in the 90s with all the rest. Was it 35 tunes?
There's
and you get the Wouldn't It Be Nice credit comes in because of Sleep Tight on the end of that one.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just wondering why he didn't get this
had
one.
Very little to do with one. That's a great question. And there's even a couple, I can't remember the other song. I think it was something from Today where I said, oh, your songwriting credit on this. And he said, I did? So they don't even necessarily remember everything they did back then. So it's interesting. But you can hear anyone who's a Beach Boys fan or grew up listening to the Beach Boys, you can hear Mike's lyrical contribution.
It's his attitude and...
It's the whole song is Mike's attitude. But the beginning, this song, it's so great because it's a look at what's to come, right? And nobody had any idea what was around the bend. But the fact that Brian did this song between Summer Days and the Party album is another great thing.
Right. And it's, forgive me, David, I want to say Party comes out and it's almost just like not even a month later, the Little Girl single comes out and it's backed by There's No Other from the Party album. And I kind of felt like it was Brian's statement of, okay, this goofy album's coming out, but here's what we're really working on. And then when it tanked, then the suits at Capitol put Barbara Ann out, tanked, it got to 20.
Okay, exactly. It was a top 20 hit, right? That's not bad. But what happened, and I was a DJ out of high school, so I can speak to this exactly. What happened was the single was sent to radio stations, and because of the dead air after Split Man, and I can't remember what the other verbiage was, it stops twice in the song.
Right.
And because there's 5 seconds of dead air, the program directors at the radio stations didn't want them playing the song,
right?
Because there was dead air, and some clever, depending on where you worked. What I understand historically is some people would go and put the song on tape, and then they would take the razor blade to the tape and take out the dead air part, and then put it back on the radio. So because they like the song that much, because it's an incredible song. It really is an incredible song. The build, the way the song builds, the way and the what I'll refer to as dramatic stops, is because Brian, from my perspective, is Brian wanted the listener engaged. That's why he stopped the song twice. He wants the listener to get pulled in, and so that happens, right? You're just all of a sudden Split Man. Ding, 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 and it's just everything.
Well, do you mind if I talk about the music for a little bit, David?
I've
actually kind of, I first heard Little Girl on Spirit of America when I was born in 1969. So I got Endless Summer for Christmas when I was 5 years old, but I didn't have Spirit of America, but some neighbors had it. And there were lots of things off Spirit of America that I only got to hear at their house, right? But I still remember at that very young age, that intro was so magical and mystical. I didn't know what was going on, but fast forward to my teenage years when I really heard it from a different musical perspective, that intro melted me. Melted my brain the way the California Girls intro did and the way Wouldn't It Be Nice had been. I remember playing it for friends all the time just to say, what in the world is going on here? Before I analyzed it when I was younger, that guitar figure always felt like it had something contrapuntal going on in it, just like in California Girls that I kind of knew wasn't there. But since I found out it's the high G string on a 12-string guitar that gives things that type of a movement. And I'm all talking about before I had analysis added to this. The body of the tune always felt good, but because of the looseness of the tonal centers, it always had that like, wow, where are we? What in the world's going on here? Until you get that first big one chord of the chorus. And then you go, oh my gosh, here's finally where we are. Then we've got another key change in the chorus. And then we've got that La Du Day bridge. And then a masterful modulation back into the intro, recycled just like he did on, so many tunes where he'd take that intro and recycle it back into the bridge. Are some of my favorite Brian moments. Adam, I'm going to have you real quick. I don't think David will be able to hear it, but we'll let our listeners know. Play that clip of Brian playing the intro on the piano and explaining just a little bit real quick.
Well, there's probably one, if not as good as California Girls, almost as good as California Girls. To me, there's no way the Beach Boys could ever sound any better than on The Little Girl I Once Knew. It featured their harmonies.
So he's saying it's as good as are there similarities? Like, or is it just,
there are. Earlier when I spoke of the sound of the guitar, because I think it's the same guitar, it might be the Rick, but the contrapuntal, there's counterpoint. It sounds like there's not, but it gives the illusion. And so, yes, there's similar things in the texture, but I think he's talking about the overall music effect. And in some ways, the intro encapsulates the entire tune like the California Girls intro does. It's kind of like saying, here's the Cliff Notes version of what's going to hit you. And
gotcha. Okay. Because, I did do what I did when I was listening to this is I did go listen to California Girls. I actually went and listened to the intro again to see, because I was like, why does this kind of feel similar? And so I did do that. So that's actually kind of cool to hear, because I did kind of feel that a little bit.
Now go ahead and bring up the real intro from the track, and I just want to go ahead and let it play, and even where the organ triplets come in over the top.
Okay.
Where he got that second chord, I don't know. All right. I'm just going to go ahead and play the guitar figure real quick. Sends me into bliss. There's so many things going on. Now, let's put that, the bass riff and that together. So then, to me, at just the opening of the tune and everything, that hints at this chord right here, which is a B, probably a B sus2 with the F sharp in the bass. Kind of encapsulates that. Then we got the next bass riff, and this. So that's going to a C sharp, I'm going to call it, right there. But the second half of it kind of goes, or maybe kind of is the full version of that little piece of thing going on right there. Then we got this, which outlines the G sharp minor, the bass riff, but then the guitar riff is a little piece of a B chord. G sharp minor is the 3 if we're in B, so that's a sub, and that's why that works. But then the last one, so that's over in a big E, which if we're in B, that's the 4, and this movement would be 4 1 4, but it kind of echoes the other one in a slightly different way. Okay,
can you play that together?
Yeah.
sorry, man.
Let's see.
I would love to hear that. Wild.
Yeah, it's hard to get back and forth from that.
But I wanted to see that in the
way that feels is it still leaves you in the spot of limbo. You think it's in B. When I was a kid, I never even thought of what key it was in. It was all just like that. But then we get into the body of the tune and the limbo really starts.
Yeah.
I want to say right here, the bass line drives it, and it's Carol Kay, the wonderful bassist with the Wrecking Crew. The group of musicians they call the Wrecking Crew.
That's just a stand-up bass?
No, the P bass.
It's P bass.
Yeah, so she's there's probably doubled by one of the other guys on an upright. And then also you've got the organ shuffle rhythm. Dun, 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 dun. Primarily the organ is what's carrying that, and that's Don Randy, the same guy that's playing those triplet. Oh, I forgot to say about in the intro, the second half of it, right? He starts playing that. Ups. So that helps us define those chords too, and maybe what Brian was thinking about them. Okay, I'll shut up.
Yeah, but I'm glad you did that. I like that little piece.
So, and then also another thing I love about the body of the tune, I love the saxes and the line that they double the guitar in the verses. Da 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 ba dum ba. Anyway, that's a magic thing of it. I'm going to get into the chords. In the verse, I said the intro leaves us in limbo. The chords for the first part of it are G sharp minor to C sharp. Which feels like a 2-5 change within the key system in the key of F sharp. Then it moves to, we'll call it D sharp minor here, to a G sharp. Which feels like the same thing, a 2-5, but now it feels like it's in C sharp, and here is that C sharp that we get for like finally, oh wow, it must be in C sharp, and then all of a sudden we get this, and we go, whoa, wait a second, wasn't what I was thinking. What's that? It's an F sharp chord. Well, that could, if we're in C sharp now, it could be the 4 of that. Or, wait a second, F sharp, that first 2-5 we played was in F sharp, so maybe now we're hinting at the first key, but in reality, it was the 5 of the key of B that we're now in, and we finally have that nice, big, defined thing of it being in B. She's not the little girl I once knew. And these are easy chords, 1-5, 1-4. And now, modulate up a minor third to D. Same thing, 5. And then, love this where we go. Kind of that could be a D, D, and then D with an E in the bass, and then E with F sharp in the bass. That's only a step away from the next G sharp minor, which is so we're there. Whole thing, right? Whole thing again. Goes through the chorus exactly the same way. Then we've got the bridge, which really firmly centers on that B thing again, and just back and forth from the 1 to the 4, B to E. La. We got the chorus again, but we don't start with it in B like it starts. We start with it at the modulated second half in the key of D. And then the 4 finally, which we never get in the earlier choruses in this key, which that right there really hit me as a kid. I didn't know why. Now I want to say right here, and then the intro comes back in right. Okay, so where I thought in the beginning that was over that, well, that modulation coming back goes. So that could be, it could be part of this E with an F sharp in the bass, which would be like, you could also say it's like an F sharp sus4, which this other could also be. So maybe the whole thing is he is really magically stitched this thing together, and for all of that, guys, I apologize.
Yeah, well, I guess, that's funny. You would apologize because I'm sitting here and I'm trying to follow as someone who doesn't understand music theory or anything like that. But like when you're saying like it's a maybe or like I guess
there are ambiguous things in music, and so the relationships can be described this way. Like I said, that chord could be a B sus2 with the F sharp in the bottom, and then, but maybe when he's hinting at this with playing that E with the F sharp in the bottom, which could also be an F sharp sus4, maybe he's implying both of those chords right there.
Okay.
This is out there, man.
Yeah. And what's kind of what you're describing, which it's a little validating for me as well, is that like I was having a hard time getting into this song,
mm-hmm.
and it was because I couldn't, like, it was confusing kind of like to like. It worked, but like I don't know. There was just like, it's hard for me to like kind of track. I think I don't know the best way to describe it until you get to the chorus, which is like kind of like you said, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, that feels a little more. I don't know.
I think the music hit you exactly the way Brian wanted it to. You've always amazed me in that after I'll show you, you always do resonate a little bit more with a tune you're like having maybe a problem resonating with, and then when I'll break it down, you're able to feel the things I'm breaking down.
Yeah, exactly. Like even like when you just did that little like the
triplets, organ part.
Yeah, like when you did that, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's the part that like you isolated the part that like feels good to me, you know what I mean, or the part that I liked. So that's always cool to see.
You always wonder where even if you're not a musician, the way Brian crafts music, I feel like he makes even difficult music accessible to the layperson, and so I feel like anybody would almost get an uneasiness with this, trying to figure out where they are until the chorus comes.
Then that's literally what I was about to say, is that like then once that happens, it's like you kind of settle in a little bit, but. I was like almost felt like embarrassed to be like I'm having a hard time like getting it, you know what I mean, and so that really helps kind of clarify those feelings.
Kind of it illustrates again how some of the some of the deep music that I'm really into, and I've really obviously thought about it a whole heck of a lot, but to the lay person it might not be as accessible until you have somebody explain it to you or break it down like that. I also love, there's so many Beach Boys. It's Brian and Al on the opening line, and they're answered by Carl. And then, so I love those parts of it. As a matter of fact, when I met Al and Big Sur, and he referred to this, he says, "What's that one, me and Carl's duet?" And I finally figured out he's talking about little girl when we were talking about it. But I also, of course, Mike's bass vocal is pivotal to this song, and it has so much to do with all of the hooks. But then Bruce is the answer in the chorus. After Brian sings the really high, "She's not the little girl I was," and then Bruce comes in with that answering. So I feel like, we talked about how big of a year 65 was for Bruce. Obviously, it's when he came in, but he just started impacting all the recordings so much, just was a huge part of it. And other than that, what I have to say about it is I was always pleased to find out that John Lennon loved this tune in its time. And I think George Harrison did too. Had it on his jukebox or something.
So remember the two breaks. It's Split Man and Look Out, Babe.
Okay.
Those are the two. Yeah. So I hadn't listened to it in a while, but what I would say in terms of somebody who's not familiar with the song is just, it's a song about a chick. I would just encourage anyone not to get caught up too much in what it means musically or how it was put together, because it's over my head. I just think, how does it feel? How do I feel when I listen to it? Mm-hmm. And I feel the romance. I mean, I feel the guy's perspective of the song. I'm in it.
I always say that too, that regardless of how difficult anything is going on musically, that it's more about the way it makes you feel. However, one of the things that we noticed that when we started going through the albums and really doing some of the deep dives into the music and what possibly could be going on in some of this stuff, we got a lot of people liked some of that explanation, and so we started kind of integrating that, even though it's not maybe the point of Brian's music to have it analyzed.
Right, but I think it helps people understand that it's extremely complicated music, and you just sing along to it, right? You know, like fun, or you go back to the early days, and it doesn't really matter. Even on fun, Glenn Campbell actually played guitar on that one. So it's interesting how musically impactful and critical it was, not just to the Beach Boys' success, but to how it changed music. Mm-hmm. It changed music.
I feel like we've already kept you way too long. Thank you so much for being a part of this.
David, really appreciate it. For those I'm sure most people know who you are, but if they don't, where can they, find out more about
ESQ.com?
Is that just ESQ.com?
So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, if you go to Facebook, Endless Summer Quarterly Magazine has a page. And if you want to find out more about the magazine, it's ESQUARTERLY.com. So esquarterly.com. And you can read, there's a news page, and you can read the latest news. You can read about the latest issue. We've covered just about every era of the group. I mean, even the albums that the general public haven't celebrated.
No, it is really, I don't know. It's complete. It seems like, I started digging through all the old episodes and everything like that. I just cannot believe how just in depth every one of the issues are. And I want to, I just love it. And I want to thank you for all of this work that you've done over the years. You're a great big part of keeping the Beach Boys alive, and we thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Just like you. I'm a fan.
Oh, well, thank you.
Perfect.
And thank you for being a part of the podcast, David.
Thank you
it's
very
an honor.
much, David. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. I recommend people subscribe. When you go to the website, just look at there's a button at the top that says magazine subscription. You can go there. And just so you guys know, your information on how to come to your podcast will be in the next issue of the magazine.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, David. And say hello to Ethan for us again. And thank you for your time.
Awesome.
Okay, my pleasure.
Okay, thank you so much again for listening to the podcast. That was a great conversation we had. Loved having David. The fact that he would take time out of his busy schedule to come and talk to us in My Beach Boys Room podcast. It really means a lot. So
a bunch.
Once again, thank you so much, David. And next episode, we're looking. Is it time? Is it time for?
Yeah, we're gonna go deep into pet sounds.
We'll see how this one turns out. Maybe it's a 2-part. You're gonna knock it out in one. Knock it out in one. Okay. Well, we will see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for your patience. We'll try to get these things out as best we can when schedules line up.